So the reason I decided to teach this class is that a lot of people come to me and their main focus is digestion. And the big thing is your digestion runs everything from top to bottom in your body, literally. But the foundation of why I decided to do this is that I'm running into a lot of problems where people are over-consuming fermented foods. And you can over-consume a good thing, right? And so I want to be able to teach you about ferments tonight, their roles, the science behind them, and then we'll talk about good and safe levels for consumption, okay? Because there is too much of a good thing, all right? So, oh, helps if I turn the guy on, doesn't it? All right, so we are full of microorganisms, and they look like that. We're full of them. And the big thing is that in marketing, and this started back 2000-something, mid-2000s, where the Purell came out and everything became germ-related, and germs are scary, and germs are bad, and you shouldn't have any germs, and they want you to disinfect everything. The antibacterial soaps, and they've even made antibacterial bedding and like that. And the problem is now we've wiped out all this good flora. And we look at this picture and it's like, well, that's not looking too friendly. Well, it actually is. And these are your fighters. These are what are inside you that you can't see, that do the work that when a pathogen comes in, it lights up and says attack, okay? So we want to make sure that we have these guys in us and not wiped out of us, which is what they're trying to do when they're using antibacterial products. So we want to get rid of the hysteria and understand that bacteria is good if it's in the right realm, right? Because there are bacteria that cause infection, but we want to get good healthy bacteria into us. So our first introduction to microorganisms started in the birth canal, and then it's breastfeeding, so breast milk and the bacteria on the skin for mama. And then we do know that people who are born through C-section and or not bottle fed are babies that have lower microorganisms in them because they didn't get born through the birth canal, which they get copious amounts of microorganism as they are born through mama. And then if they're not breastfed, then again we're not getting the microorganisms that they need in that area. And then the next one, which all of us I believe do, is crawling around on the floor and then running around outside and playing. And that gives you contact with germs in various different ways. And the next one is skin-to-skin contact with their parents, your siblings, and other people, whether you're shaking hands or like that. But that sets up your microorganisms. It's not a bad thing. That's the way it was designed to be. And that's where our health starts. So we can see where if we weren't breastfed, if we're C-section, if our parents are constantly, and I see this with mamas all the time, that they'll kids will be out playing and they're throwing hand sanitizer on them left and right, and then using the wipes as well because they're getting germs. Well, they're also the sickest kids that you'll see because they've got the running noses, the earaches, and like that because they don't have bacteria like they should, the good bacteria to help them fight their diseases. So we talked about part of this, what depletes the microorganisms, and one is your hand sanitizers. We've talked about overwashing our hands, so people with OCD, medical professionals, food handlers, it just absolutely blows me away walking in the hospital, and they have Purell everywhere, and they're hitting it when they come in, they're hitting it when they come out, they're walking through it, and I mean, it's just everywhere. Yes, absolutely, because there's no germs. And then we have antibacterial soaps and detergents, the sanitizing wipes, the bacterial sprays, the bedding we talked about, even building materials. They're trying to make building materials antibacterial. We're not touching anymore because everything's done here and on the computer, so we're not getting a lot of human touch. Immunizations will wipe them out. not getting enough fiber in the diet, whole food nutrients, a leaky intestinal tract, lack of stomach acid, medications and acid blockers all wipe out good bacteria. Okay, so as you know, when you come to see me, I always try to give you the science behind everything that I'm doing, because I think it's really important that you're educated, right? Why do something if you don't have a foundation, right? So I'm going to give you the science behind this. So the human GI tract is a host of trillions of microorganisms from more than 300 different species, and these organisms provide a wide range of benefits that can generally be classified as protective functions, structural functions, and metabolic functions. And many of these benefits are unrealized when any number of GI disturbances results in microbial imbalance, which is called dysbiosis or leaky gut. And I'm sure many of you have heard that term before, all right? So healthy microflora is important for the production of some vitamins, K, biotin, and folate, improved absorption of many minerals, the fermentation of some dietary fibers, and we're going to get into that, the fermentation of dietary fibers, and then which nutrients are formed when these guys break down, the dietary fibers break down, they form nutrients for your colon, that fermentation process, okay? And then they convert into phytonutrients. So when you look at this slide, this is as close as I could get, and I wanted more pieces to it, but I didn't know how to manipulate because I'm not a computer geek kind of person to do that. But it says routes of exposure is ingestion, injection, inhalation. And we're missing some components there. One is you can get it through your mouth, but you can also get microbes through your ears and through your eyes, and you can get them through your feet when you walk around barefoot. Okay, so there's other forms of contact that yes, you ingest, so the foods that you eat, the injections you get through your vaccinations, and inhalation, anything that you breathe. So any orifice will bring microbes into the body. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right, so microflora produce vitamins K, B7, and folate. And the thing is that these guys are vital to your health, but we don't realize this aspect of it. So this is the science behind it that I want you to be able to understand, okay? So here's the benefits of vitamin K. K1 goes directly to your liver to help in blood clotting. So when you know someone who has blood clotting issues, we know that K1 isn't present, right? K2 is made by the bacteria that line your gastrointestinal tract. So if you're low on gastrointestinal microbes, guess what? We don't have K2. It goes straight to your blood vessel walls, bones, skin, and tissues other than your liver. Now, K3 synthetically made. That means if you see K3 on the market, that's been made by some scientists. So we don't buy that one, okay? So, vitamin K does occur naturally in dark green leafy vegetables like collard greens and spinach, and in fermented foods. Surprise, surprise. All right, it is a bone builder. It reduces vertebral fractures. Vertebral fractures is osteoporosis, that breakdown in the spine, right? Bone loss, arthritis, and it can help reverse osteoporosis, which is really important. It prevents heart disease. It prevents arterial calcification because it keeps calcium out of the artery linings, all right? We talked about blood clotting, varicose veins, tooth decay, and this is a big one that a lot of people don't know, cancer, prostate, lung, liver, colon, skin, and leukemia. When we hear about people getting skin cancer, we know that they don't have K2, okay? They have a low production of K2. So it's really important to make sure that we're eating good fermented foods, we're getting our gut flora up, and we're getting good levels of K2. We actually started just selling a product, vitamin D3K2, so that we can help boost that, okay? Now the most important thing to know is vitamin K is a fat-soluble vitamin, which means it stays in your body, it doesn't leave, and it has to be present with fat in order for your body to absorb it, all right? But it also is driven by vitamin D. So D and fat, K1, K2 get driven, okay? So they all have to be working together. All right, so here's a big one. Biotin, which is B7, helps the body metabolize fats, proteins, glucose, and amino acids. It grows, strengthens, and repairs muscles. You've got the biggest muscle sitting in your chest right here. It never rests. It never stops. And if it does stop, that means you're not alive anymore, right? Your heart. So it's really important that we have enough biotin for our heart. It's important for weight loss, hair loss, and skin conditions. So people who are losing their hair, we need to check to see, are we low in biotin? Heart problems, Parkinson's disease, blood sugar management, vaginal yeast infections. Now the thing about B7 is it's water soluble, which means you're going to consume it and it's gone, and the next day you need to consume it again because your body won't hold it, okay? Now, everybody wants to run out and go get biotin. I don't want you to go out and get biotin. I want you to eat organ meats, egg yolks, fermented foods, avocado, cauliflower, berries, fish, legumes, and mushrooms. That's how you get your biotin. Okay? Okay, so next one, folate. Now I've got quite some extensive information for you on folate, and I really don't want to bore you guys. And here's the but you need to know this because I don't want you to go buy it, okay? So, it's vital for nervous system function. It assists in productions of serotonin, melatonin, glutamine, GABA, and dopamine. Those are big ones that we hear with people that are their neurotransmitters are low. It decreases homocysteine, all right? Red blood cell production prevents neurotube defects in fetuses, decreases depression, decreases the risk of breast cancer. Foods high in folate are lentils, pinto beans, garbanzo beans, asparagus, spinach, fermented foods, navy beans, black beans, kidney beans, turnip greens, and broccoli. So I'm going to jump up here because I think it's important that you guys understand this one. We talked about nitric oxide last week, and it comes from, anybody remember? Those red guys that most people eat. Beets. Right, beets is where nitric oxide comes from. Balanced levels of nitric oxide in the blood are important for cardiovascular health. Nitric oxide helps to regulate many cardiovascular functions, and appropriate levels of nitric oxide are considered protective against high blood pressure, excessive clumping of platelet cells, and other key aspects of blood flow. If folate is not present, the body produces too much oxygen, oxygen free radical that's called superoxide, and it worsens cardiovascular risks if we have too much. So it's really important to keep this guy in balance. Okay, now a lot of you, I work with you on your methylation cycles, how your body properly detoxifies. So this is going to get very scientific, but I need you to really understand this. The overall cycle used by our body to regenerate active forms of folate is called the folate cycle. It's directly tied to the central cycle in the cardiovascular health called your methylation cycle. So these two work hand in hand, okay? The methylation cycles are a primary way of understanding blood homocysteine levels, since the cycle continually interconverts the amino acid methionine and its fellow amino acid homocysteine. So a lot of you get blood work taken to look at your cardiac CRP, your homocysteine levels, right? And many times people will come to me and they'll say, I've been diagnosed with high homocysteine. Well, that tells us that folate's not working properly in the methylation processes. So the other guy that's in there that you see, methionine, it is a amino acid that helps the liver and kidneys move heavy metals from the body. It's a big one. It's also responsible for fat metabolism in the liver and for healthy skin, hair, and nails. It also grows muscle and makes sure that your arteries are healthy. So these are three key processors for your body to make sure that everything's in balance. So when your folate cycle breaks down, our methylation cycle breaks down, and this is where that liver gets overly burdened and it's not able to pull toxins like it's supposed to. Okay? So down at the bottom, folate is a central nutrient for cardiovascular health, and its role in cardio support is wide-ranging, and they're still scientifically trying to figure it out. Okay? So here's my warning against folate. Because folate is provided by a much larger variety of foods than B12, and because a wider variety of foods are typically fortified with folate and not B12, it's sometimes possible to get a very large amount of folate in comparison to B12. That's the thing about, and we talked about this last week about synthetic foods, where your packaged foods, the FDA mandates that they spray the synthetic vitamins on your food. And it doesn't matter if it's a bag of Cheetos to Raisin Bran, there has to be X amount of vitamins present, whether they're real or not. They have to be sprayed on. So you have to look at, when you're eating packaged foods, how much of what you're getting in them. You have to turn those ingredient labels around and read those, because that's where you're going to get excessive amounts of synthetic vitamin, okay, is in your packaged processed foods.
Can you tell us why do they have to put those vitamins, like, they're usually synthetic vitamins? Like,
Right, that's a really good question. The reason they have to put synthetic vitamins on is because when you process something, and we remember the picture of, we had corn on the cob, and then it went from corn down to all the different derivatives of corn. Well, if you take something that's real and turn it into a vaccination or into a Cheeto or something like that, you've wiped out all the nutrients, right? So now they synthetically put nutrients back in. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's supposed to. So this type of imbalance can be problematic, since excessive amounts of folate can make deficiency of B12 more difficult to detect through standard lab tests. And I say this over and over again. I keep thinking that there's something not quite right when I get your lab test results, and I keep saying there must be something in that methylation cycle, that liver's not working right, because that's where B12 likes to hang out. And it's usually this type of process going on where we have too much of a synthetic thing. So you can create this type of folate to B12 imbalance from a routine combination of fortified foods and supplementing with folic acid. So how many people, pregnant women, right, take a lot of folic acid, and then at the same time they're eating a lot of these boxed foods. So we've got to watch where we're getting it. So folate is not folic acid, and you can overdose. Okay, so we got to be careful with that. All right, so there's our warning. All right, so now that we've discussed the science behind this and how fermented foods turn into these various vitamins as they ferment, I want you to get a better understanding of what a prebiotic is and a probiotic, because when I start talking about these, everybody gives me that cross-eyed look of, what do you mean prebiotic? What are prebiotics? I only know about that stuff that Costco sells in the gallon bucket, right? So there's a big difference between prebiotics and probiotics. So what is a prebiotic? Prebiotics were first named in 1995. Prebiotics are indigestible plant fibers that ferment in the gut. This fermentation process feeds the beneficial bacteria in the gut. Think of prebiotics as fertilizer for the bacteria. So when we're asking you to eat fibrous foods, that's what a prebiotic is your fibrous foods. And remember last week when we talked about how we in the United States have such a deficit in fiber, and women should be getting around 25 grams of fiber a day. Men should be getting 38, but in the holistic nutrition world, we're looking at 50 across the board, men and women, okay? And we know that kids are getting about a quarter of what they're needing, and that's between 15 and 20 grams depending on how old they are, okay? So this is why we get kids who come to me who haven't pooped in 2, 3, 4 weeks because they're just not eating anything with fiber in it, okay? So then we can't get a fermentation process going on and we can't break it down right. So prebiotics are what control the ratio of good to bad bacteria. This ratio directly affects your immune system and your brain's ability to function properly. Research shows that people who consume prebiotics do not suffer from anxiety, depression, chronic illness, pain, increased cortisol output. And remember, cortisol is what comes out of your adrenal glands. Your kidneys sit in the back, and right on top of your kidneys are those little adrenal glands, and they shoot a hormone called cortisol, okay? So prebiotics are not destroyed in the body by varying levels of acidity, pH, or bacteria. They are not. That's a big key word for you. They are not destroyed by varying levels of acidity. Your stomach, do any of you guys remember, your stomach acid sits at around a 1.5 to a 3. It's pretty hot. Then your food moves into the small intestine and it moves up more towards a 6. And then once it hits the colon again, it gets hot again. It sits into about a 4. So that's why we don't want to mess around with having all this alkaline food, because you need acidity in various levels of your body. Okay? Yes,
Can
ma'am.
you tell us examples of prebiotics?
Yes. Broccoli, kale, spinach, fruits. Yeah, it's fruits and vegetables. Fiber. Nuts. You bet. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. So, what is a probiotic? So, 1907 is when they named probiotics. Isn't that interesting? The dependence of the intestinal microbes on the food makes it possible to adopt measures to modify the flora in our bodies and to replace the harmful microbes by useful microbes. And we talked about this with Hippocrates last week, that we're going way back in 400 BC. Well, here's this scientist who in 1907 already knew about probiotics. So this has been around a long time, but the way they're marketing it to you guys, this is new and emergent and really amazing, cool stuff. And I was like, no, it's been around for a long time, you guys, honest. Okay, a long time. Probiotics are microorganisms intentionally consumed, meaning you're taking the pill, right, or you're taking the powder. You're the one that's putting it in your mouth. That you're purchasing it to put it in, okay? They are usually consumed to rebalance the natural gut microflora. These microorganisms have been part of the food chain for millennia. Fermented foods. Surprise! They're a probiotic, right? So that's why we're talking about. Now, probiotic and a prebiotic, because most fermented foods are vegetables, right? So the slide before was talking about the importance of eating fibrous foods. Now we're talking about the importance of eating a fermented food because it has all the microbes that we need, right? So it's both. Important, commercially prepared probiotics do not become permanent members of the GI tract. Okay, the other fibrous foods do. Prebiotics are. Probiotics are not. So do you understand that? We've got to switch between these two. So here's the thing, that people will come in and there's a time and a place to buy a probiotic. And someone who's been on heavy antibiotics, who have had major surgery or have been ill, people who have a very low immune system, we have to keep it going into their body at all times, right? So yes, it comes from fermented foods, and sometimes we have to use a probiotic flush to help restore the body really, really quick, okay? Here's the thing. The researchers are saying it's in your body. Once you take a probiotic pill, then it's in your body for 24 hours. Then others are saying, no, it lasts for 2 weeks. So there's a lot of conflict about how long it actually stays. Okay, they cannot nail this one down. So here's the thing, we talk about when you're working with me, bio-individuality, everybody's body's different, right? So this is a case of everybody's body's different because the scientists are in there trying to test them, but the problem is, you may have Crohn's disease and you may have celiac and you may have just had surgery, and your demand for probiotic is going to be completely different. So you can't measure it. We believe in the holistic realm, we don't believe you can measure it because it's what your body needs at that time. Does that make sense? Okay. Here we go. So, can I just take a pill? Do I have to eat these fermented foods that you just tried? Well, first, probiotics are delicate. They're heat and stomach. The heat and stomach acid can kill them. So remember, prebiotics, they aren't heat sensitive at all. So it doesn't matter what channel they go through, they're not dying. But probiotics, when you take them in the pill, many of those bacteria are going to get wiped out based on the acid levels. Okay, and that's something they don't tell you. So finally, we don't know which good bacteria our unique bodies would benefit from because this Saccharomyces may work for you and Acidophilus may work for you. We don't know. When we consume probiotics, we're taking a guess at what bacteria might be helpful and hoping for the best. And we're also hoping the ones that make it past the heat and acid of our stomach will actually go on to provide some health benefits to our system. Okay, so it's roulette. It's roulette. But here's the unique thing. A lot of the probiotics on the market, in the big box stores and like that, when they actually test them, they're already dead. Yeah, because what they have to put on their package is based on what count they got, bacterial count they got at the time it was packaged. Well, it's alive and well then, and so when you read 60 billion, well yeah, there was 60 billion alive at the time. But how long has it been sitting on the shelf? And how old is it? You know, because it traveled, and then of course it got into a big old semi-truck to get to the store. How alive is it, right? So that's one of the big conflicts about probiotics. So the ones that we sell, they have scientifically showed us, the two forms that I sell, they've showed us from the packaging time how much bacteria is in it, and they only have a 20% loss. And the only 20% loss in it, the bacteria dying. So that they're still effective, which is important to know. So make sure that if you're going to buy them, that you're going to buy your probiotics through a medical practitioner and not big box store, because you're not getting anything out of them. And there's nothing in Dannon yogurt or Yoplait for you guys. Sorry.
Okay, so I don't eat dairy.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still possible to, without a
Yeah.
supplement, to get enough?
Yeah. Yes. We're going to go through that.
Okay.
You betcha. You betcha. Does that make sense?
Real quick, so like if you get plain yogurt, doesn't have any sugar and it's
Right. That's fine.
will they be alive? Or?
Yeah. They're still alive.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm talking in pill form.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you add sugar, do you remember this last week when I brought out the kids' vitamins and Costco's probiotic for adults? Yeah, and you're getting 6 teaspoons full of sugar in those little babies. Yeah, once you put sugar with a probiotic, it's null and void. Okay? So, any of the Dannon Actives, or Activia and all those guys, yeah, no. When you actually read the studies, it's pretty dismal that it doesn't actually work. What's in Dannon yogurt that does work is they put fiber in there. That's what gets your body going, because you aren't getting enough fiber in the first place, right? So they put that in. You don't have to answer that.
Does honey affect sugar?
Yes, it does. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. Yeah. All right, so we're going to now go into the history of ferments, so that we can move into what we're going to be cooking up tonight. All right? So the earliest record of fermentation dates back as far as 8,000 BC in the Fertile Crescent, and nearly every civilization since has included at least one fermented food in its culinary heritage and some form of wine, right? Mine's a ferment, ladies. Woo! From Korean kimchi and Indian chutneys to the familiar sauerkraut, yogurt, and cheese, global cultures have crafted unique flavors and traditions around fermentation. Fermentation was used to preserve foods during non-growing seasons for seasonings and condiments for various foods. Okay, so when I grew up, at my great aunt's house and my grandma's house, she had a cellar, and cellars are scary. They're scary. I hated going into them. My grandma's cellar moved finally from outside into her basement, but usually they're about an 8x8 to an 8x10 hole dug in the ground, okay, because that was refrigeration. My grandparents grew up in the hills above North Bend, and they didn't have refrigerators yet, so they dug big holes in the ground, and they used oil barrels, and the oil barrels were their refrigerators. They put shelves in them, and then they would go down to Lake Ketchilas when it would freeze and cut up ice, and then they'd pack the ice with straw, and that's how they would get through the summer months to keep food cold. And then in the winter months, it either went down to the river or it went into the snow to stay cold. So refrigeration makes a big difference, but Grandma had to do a lot of canning and made a lot of sauerkrauts and like that because that's my heritage. But many of you, I'm sure, this looks very familiar of having some canned foods around. And if you notice down on the bottom in both of these pictures, these are their vegetables. So they'd harvest the crops, and then they would keep vegetables down on the floor where it was coldest to keep the vegetables through the winter months so that they would have food until it was time to harvest again. But going into these things, there were no lights, there's no electricity, so you didn't know what you were running into. And I knew there was snakes and mice and stuff in there. There never were, because they couldn't, it was too cold. But when you're a little girl, come on, that's all you can think about. What's gonna get you? So that was what you probably grew up with, or your parents grew up with, was a cellar that they would start their preservation of food that way. Okay. So why did they choose to do fermentation? So it's critical for some cultures. So some foods in some countries are poisonous. The fermentation process removes the poisons. In Africa, and don't tell me how they figured this out, there are plants that are full of arsenic. But if you ferment the food properly, it removes the arsenic and then they can consume it. So hopefully you get the one that isn't full of arsenic, right? So that's one of them. So in some countries, fermentation protects against foodborne illnesses in regions that have poor sanitation. And some have fermented foods that are used for medicinal purposes. And links between fermented foods and healing can be traced as far back as Rome and China. And for other cultures, we talked about this, it's for the preservation between seasons, right? But let's stay out of the arsenic ones. Yikes. Okay, so is it worth it? Is it worth making your own ferments, right? So, does it benefit your health? Yes. The center of disease processes starts with a poor digestive system. 80% of your immune system sits right here from your rib cage down. There's your immune system. So, we have to have a strong gut microbe family living in there for you to be able to fight off disease and cancer. Cancer is a low immune system. Hands down. If your body is fighting like it's supposed to, if it has the strong immune system, it will go in there and fight. We all have cancer cells in us. It's do we turn it on or not? And that's why you can have a family of 5 and 3 of them will die of cancer, but 2 don't. How come? Oh, it's genetics. No, because you can get them tested and they will still have the same genes. They just didn't turn it on. Okay? So it's important, it's vital for you to have a strong gut microbe, a strong immune system. So an imbalance of beneficial to pathogenic bacteria and yeast can disrupt the delicate intestinal barrier, which constitutes the body's first line of defense against pathogens. The fermentation process actually makes the food more digestible to us by breaking down the hard to digest cellulose food. This is beneficial for those who have digestive issues. People who have digestive issues have a low immune system, and they get sick quite frequently because there's nothing there to fight, okay? So, your gut-brain relationship, your diet is largely responsible for your gut health, and when you feed your body the fuel it's designed for, your gut flora will be able to maintain optimal balance, which then supports optimal physical and mental health. And I have a handout for you guys that I'll email to you, because it's a couple pages and I wanted to save paper, because that's the way I am. So I'll email this handout to you, but it shows you the direct relationship between your gut function and your brain function, especially people who suffer from anxiety and depression. We can see a direct relationship to those people, all right? So warning, if you choose to purchase your fermented foods, make sure that they are not pasteurized, because pasteurization is cooking. It heats them. So if it's pasteurized, guess what? It's a no-go. It's a dead product. All right? So when you're buying your fermented foods, it should say raw. Raw. Okay? All right. So many of you were talking about, wow, I've never liked sauerkraut before, and I've tried this and I kind of like it, or I didn't know sauerkraut could taste like this. The sauerkraut that you're finding on the market shelves is the pasteurized kind. It's been cooked, and then they use vinegars in it, and they use food colorings and chemicals. That's not how it should taste, and that's why our forefathers, going all the way back 8,000 years ago, they didn't have all these chemicals and preservatives. They had salt. That's it, salt. And that was their preservative. Okay, so when you're reading, and we talked about turning your bottles around, read your ingredients. Make sure that when you read your ingredients on these guys, that they say water and salt. Salt should be, and then whatever they're fermenting. Okay? All right. So, what ferments health? And there's a list of it, because, again, we're going right back to your gut health. If you have poor gut health, you have everything. Right? Autoimmune everything, sensory integration issues, autism, diarrhea, colitis, IBS, joint pain, etc. And we find that when people finally get their gut microbes up where they're supposed to be, a lot of this goes away. A lot of it goes away. So pretty important. Okay? So, autism is on the rise. And they're saying by, 2020, it'll be 1 in 3 boys will have autism. Yeah, really scary. And the thing is what they are finding, those on the holistic side are finding that they have almost no gut flora. And once they go in and they clean out their diet, they remove all the foods that cause sensitivities, they rebalance and repopulate the gut flora, a whole bunch of those autistic tendencies completely go away, and many get healed. So it's important. They call it brain damage, actually, is what autism is brain injury. So they can, and many of them can get healed. All right, so these are just some of the beneficial bacteria found in your raw fermented foods. And some raw ferments can have over 50 live strains found in them. 50 live. So every time you're taking a tablespoonful, you're getting a mouthful of beneficial bacteria. And that's just some of them. When I went through and looked it up, I couldn't fit them all on the page. It was like, oh no, I just give up. I'll just tell you all about it. There's some, okay? All right. Next, here's our different types of ferments, and some of these you'll have heard of. Alcohol, beer, cheese, coffee, creme fraiche, kefir, kimchi, kombucha, kvass, miso, pickles, poi, sauerkraut, SCOBY, sour cream, temp, wine, and yogurt. When I actually looked up ferments, there was over 150 of them. So this is just some that you might have heard of, okay? And some of these may be foreign to you, all right? But there's a lot of them out there, been around for a long time, long time. Yes, ma'am.
So those one drinks that were in there, the kombucha.
Kombucha.
They sell in the stores, are they okay? Are they healthy?
Yeah, I'll
Or-
talk about it now, but it's in here a little bit further, but I will talk about that now. That's one of the biggest things that I find in my practice is overconsumption of kombucha. Kombucha is, and we'll get into this, see this disc up top here? That's a SCOBY, and that's how we start a kombucha. And what kombucha is tea and sugar. And what happens is people will stop the fermenting process when it tastes good. It's still sugar, right? And that's not, when kombucha is in its right form, it's like drinking vinegar. It shouldn't be sweet at all, okay? But people stop that fermentation process, which makes that sugar level higher. And I've had people bring me their kombucha because I want to see what they're drinking. And it has over 20 plus grams of sugar because they're buying market level kombucha. They're not making it from scratch. Well, the problem is you'll get less sugar buying a pot that way than you will a kombucha. So are they getting beneficial bacteria? No. They're actually feeding the yeast in their gut, and it's getting worse. So by the time they come to me, they have some massive yeast issues. And it's always women, and it's always massive yeast infection. Okay? So, SCOBY, this is a SCOBY, or the mother. And then lactic acid fermentation, which is what we're going to do tonight, is done with salts. Okay? So, lacto-ferment, utilizing salt, vegetables, and water, creating lactobacillus. You know what that is. So, lacto-ferments, bacteria that can be harmful to us can't tolerate salt and die in the fermentation process. Lactobacillus organisms begin converting lactose and other sugars present in the food into lactic acid. This creates an acidic environment that safely preserves the vegetables and gives lacto-fermented foods their classic tangy flavor, which you got to taste tonight, especially on those pickles. They have quite a bite, right? All right. And then we have whey fermentation, and what they do with whey, and you can do this with cheesecloth, you don't have to buy one of these special cups, is all they're doing is using kefir or yogurt, plain yogurt, and they strain it to get the liquid out. And then that's what they use as the fermentation process, or the starter for fermentation, okay? Sourdough, you guys know what sourdough is, yummy. And then kefir grains, these are kefir grains here. And you can get kefir, everybody says, oh, it's liquid yogurt. Kefir is not liquid yogurt. If you've ever drank kefir, it doesn't even come close to tasting like yogurt. And it has triple the amount of probiotics in it than what yogurt has. So kefir is, you can make kefir water, and you can make a what looks like a liquid yogurt kefir, and those who are lactose intolerant, some of it will have lactose in it, some of it will have casein, so if you have a dairy sensitivity, the kefir and the whey are probably not the way to go for you, okay? All right, so, well, can I just buy my own raw fermented foods? Yes, but be prepared to pay. Back there, you're looking at $42 worth. Yeah, expensive. 42 for those 4 things. Yeah. Yikes. Versus going home and taking a couple carrots out and shredding them, or some vegetables that you have left over and throwing them in a jar and throwing some salt on it. Maybe $1, $2, right? There's a big difference, which you'll learn tonight. Okay, so yes, you can definitely pay through your nose. Okay, warning. Here we go, another warning. When to be cautious with ferments. Yeast infections. You don't get to have vinegar, kombucha, or dairy products. Mold poisoning. Avoid vinegar, kombucha, and dairy products. We have a weak immune system. That means we start Small. There's so many people that they get on the ferment bandwagon and they go and start consuming large amounts of ferments, and it will upset your tummy something fierce. You will not like the side effects. Okay, so we start small. People with digestive system illnesses, IBS, Crohn's, diverticulitis, celiac, we start with a teaspoon of ferment a day and we gradually work up. Okay, people with cancer, pancreatic, stomach, intestinal, and colon, we have to be very careful, especially if we have pancreatic cancer and they've had a Whipple, which removes the gallbladder, a portion of the small intestine, the pancreas, and portions of the stomach. They have to be really, really careful taking in a ferment, okay? And then we've talked about this, and I'm going to emphasize this again, overconsumption. You guys, you're going to get into this and you're going to think this is great, and I need to have my ferments every day. And one of the things is you'll offset that balance. There's a balance to everything. In America, we think if a little's good, a lot is even better. Not with microbes. Absolutely not with microbes. You need to be really, really careful. Go slow and start out with a tablespoon a day. See how your body handles it, but work up to about a half a cup. Okay, and if you can tolerate a half a cup in a day, and that means a quarter cup in the morning and a quarter cup at night, if you feel okay, you can move up to a cup in a day. But don't go any higher than that because you're going to start offsetting your microbes, okay? And we're going to end up with problems on the other side, okay? So how do you eat them? Well, you ate them straight out of a jar tonight. That's the best way to do it. Use them in smoothies to top on your meats, poultry, eggs. You can use them in sauces and gravies, soups and stews and salads and desserts. Those carrots make a great carrot cake. Usually a half a cup of fermented food a day. Okay, again, do you see that warning again? Don't overconsume. Can't say it enough. Okay, so let's look at a few recipes and supplies. This is what you're going to be making tonight. It's a lacto-fermented, meaning with salt, right? So we're going to be using some supplies. This gives you an idea of some different vegetables that you can use. And what you do when you're at home, we're going to assembly and line it a little different tonight, is toss them with salt and then fill your jar. Okay, and then we submerge them in the water. Then we're going to tie some cheesecloth over the top and you place it in a dark cupboard for about 5 to 7 days. And you check them each day to make sure they're always underwater. Okay, they always have to stay underwater. And then once they reach the desired taste is when you, some of these, like carrots, they have a lot of sugar to them. So you'll see some foam on top. You skim that foam off, take the extra space of water out, and then that goes into your fridge, and they're good to go. Okay? And then I've given you a recipe for cranberry chutney or relish, which is coming up this August. We're going to be seeing some great fresh apples coming through, and then cranberry season. So this is a yummy one for you guys to try towards fall season. And then I've listed some cookbooks for you guys because I'll be emailing this to y'all. So you can take a look at some cookbooks. And this one is actually how to take fermented foods that are already done and incorporating them into cookies, cakes, and stuff like that, and side dishes and like that. So how to cook with fermented foods. Okay. And then if you want to make your own fermenting crock without going into the expense, Northwest Edible Life is showing you a very inexpensive way to make one. So I've given you her web address so you can turn a mason jar into a crock. Now, if you guys are making sauerkraut, then that's a 6 month to almost a year
Holy cow.
of fermentation.
I think I'll buy
Yeah,
these.
so it's not a quickie at all. Sauerkraut takes a long time, a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you do?
So do you do the same thing, you just,
And it was like, I'm not trying to say.
No, no.
you do the
process.
same thing, you just let it sit longer?
You let it
Sure.
sit for a long time,
Sure.
it needs to be in the dark, and that's where you're gonna want a crock, because it definitely will ferment over, and you're gonna be wiping up and wiping up and wiping up on it.
So either a very large jar that
Yes,
you have room in?
yes, yeah. But sauerkraut takes a long time. Yeah, So a good sauerkraut like that has been fermenting for almost a year.